Alright guys, this is essentially I thought about doing an ASL starter kit puzzle, sort of following from chess puzzles like Mate in 1, Mate in 2 and so on. Maybe I will make more complicated one later on if there's a demand and there's good feedback. Essentially present a situation and ask what is the best possible move. So at the moment I'm using Vassal, which is playing ASL using the Vassal program. It's just easier, but you feel free to set it up at your own pleasure and private rooms and just set up the board and see whether you can play it out, or feel free to just set it up using Vassal. I guess I could also offer the save game for the Vassal module, so you can probably load it and just play through it using Vassal, but I'll see again if there's a demand for that a little bit later. So at the moment the situation is, it is turn 5, the last turn. Only the German player, so the German was the first player, and by the end of this turn the German has to take possession of this hex here, P2, this building hex, where I put just a victory marker there. Has to take it by the end of the turn. There's already been a prep fire phase, so we're currently at the movement phase, so there's only movement, defensive fire, advancing fire phase, route, advance, close combat and so on, and that's going to be the last turn. And German player has to take that hex by the end of the turn. So what we have on the board, I'll just quickly go through it. We have a Russian 447 on hex L3. Of course I'm going to basically print all of that out in that video notes, so you can probably take it and just set up the board yourself or just have a look through here. So I'm going to try and double click on everything so you see exactly what's under it. So we have a 447 on L3, we have an 8-0 leader, Russian leader, with a 426 conscript squad and a 2.6 light machine gun on K5. On N1 we have a 328 Russian half squad who has first fired just by itself, its inherent firepower, and is also carrying an unfired light machine gun, a 2.6 light machine gun, and that is on N1. On N3 we have a 458 Russian squad. Then on O6 we have a 447 German squad, another 447 on O7 that is also CX. So we're at the movement phase, but there has been a couple of moves that the German player has already made, and I'll go through them in a second. There's a 7-0 leader on P5 with a 447 squad. There is a broken German squad on Q2 who's DM'd with 1 residual firepower on it. It has been fired upon by this 237 Russian half squad, who is pinned. The reason he's pinned, he attempted to do a final protective fire on this German squad who has moved to Q2 in an attempt to capture the P2 point. It has been fired upon by final protective fire. However, the result of the final protective fire was also a pin marker on the 237 half squad. Then we have here a Russian 458 squad carrying a medium machine gun who has first fired just by itself on this German squad on S5. The reason it has fired on this German squad on S5 was this German squad was attempting, and successfully in doing so, to drop smoke on T4, so it has managed to actually drop smoke in here, but was fired upon and was pinned by this 458 Russian squad. Additionally, we have a 9-2 Russian leader on S8, along with a 458 squad carrying a 2.6 light machine gun. And finally, last but not least, as we used to say, there is a 458 Russian squad carrying a 2.6 light machine gun. So this is the situation. We're at the movement phase. The only thing the German has done thus far was he had a unit in here, in Q1. He had attempted to come, obviously it wasn't broken back then, he had attempted to come to Q2. Not sure whether he assault moved or not, but that doesn't matter for this particular instance. He was fired upon by this half squad and he was DM'd. He was broken and DM'd. The other thing that has happened, this 548 squad on S5 dropped the smoke on T4 and got itself pinned in the process. We also have a CX squad 447 on Q7. It has CX'd in the last turn, so it's not really, that marker would really come off at the start of the movement phase, but I've just put it in here as a reminder that it cannot go CX again. So that's the situation. Now, of course, in a game like that, it's not exactly like chess because you can't actually, there's dice involved. But for the purpose of clarity there and also for the purpose of the puzzle, I'm just going to take the average rolls. So that's something that I've borrowed from Mr. J. Richardson, the rule of 7. Great rule, and it's basically on the IFT table, which I will show you here. I'll just put the IFT table. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it should be on your QRDC's charts. And if you see in here, basically imagine that theoretically every result on the dice is a 7. This is the most likely result on a DR, on a die roll, capital DR, as it were. So for example, I'll just give you an example. Let's say, for example, this, let's take an example here. Okay, let's say that this, it was here, okay, and he decides to come to J4, okay, and then he's being fired upon by this 447 Russian squad. So obviously he didn't declare assault move, he just moved there. It's going to be a 4 neg 2 for FFNM and FFMO, the two big negs. So 4 neg 2 or 4 down 2, depending on how you say that. I use them, interchangeably sometimes. So assume you got a 7 result, so a 7 on the die roll, it'll be 7 minus 2, 5, and then you look on the 4, you see 5 is a 1 MC. So the 447 has to suffer a 1 morale check. Again, it does the morale check. Assume that the roll is a 7 because it was a 1 MC. He has in fact rolled an 8, and since he is a 7 morale squad, he would break. Alright, so that's it. You just imagine that every roll is a 7 and you play through like that. Now, in future puzzles, I mean, if there is a demand for it, in future puzzles, I will not necessarily use the rule 7. I will actually use actual probabilities, and the best possible move will rely on probabilities, which is a little bit more realistic. But for the purpose of, I guess, the ease of play and the ease of that first puzzle, we will just use the rule of 7 because it does work quite beautifully, if I might say so myself. So we'll get rid of the IFT for a second. So this is the situation, and again, German player moves, has to capture P2 by the end, can do anything that is allowed under the ASLSK number 1, the starter kit number 1. We don't have any guns here or anything like that, as you can see, and anything is possible. Of course, this relies on knowledge of the rules, so it's a little bit of an attempt as well to, I guess, to teach as well as to learn while putting down these scenarios. Now, I do hope, like I said, it's the first time that I was doing it, I do hope that I've actually captured everything correctly. There could be the remote possibility that something in here is completely broken. If that is the case, please let me know and I will correct it, and I will also put it in the video notes. But I have took great care to try and make sure that it is actually not a broken puzzle and that there is actually a good solution to it. Please don't post it on the channel itself, just to not let anyone else know. But I will actually provide the email for the show, for the video, so you can actually send your responses there. And there's no prizes or anything, but I guess you will get great lauds and appreciation if you're the first one who solve it. Again, if you're an experienced player, a full ASL player, or even an extremely experienced ASLSK player, and if it's too easy for you or whatnot, maybe you don't want to participate, that's fine. This is really more for beginners, just to have a little bit of fun getting into the starter kit, especially after reading that rule book, to just see how much of it was grasped and how much of it you actually know, and just to have a little bit of fun. So that is the scenario, capturing objective P2 and see whether the Germans can actually do it. And if there is no solution, that is also possibly a solution. So if that is the case, that is the case. As far as I can tell, there is a solution, but maybe it is a lost cause. Who knows? Just one last thing, guys, that I forgot to mention. Obviously, you don't need to worry about cowering using the rule of 7, because you're either going to roll a 3-4 or a 4-3, 5-2, 2-5, 1-6, or 6-1, so there's no point in worrying about cowering. Also, every group is assumed to be directed by the leader that is on top of it, and has been directed by it for essentially for all the phases beforehand, so there is no point worrying about which unit was directed by which leader. Just assume that leader directs the entire fire group. The other thing is lines of sight. So there are a couple of tricky lines of sights in here. That is part of the challenge. You can either try and assess it just by looking at the screen, or alternatively, if you set up the board yourself, or if you're using the Vassal program, you can use the line of sight tool that it has. For example, here on the top, I want to draw a line of sight from N4 to R3, it's fine. So you can see that it's not blocked. However, if I go through Q3 through P3, you can see that blue line at the end. It actually tells you it's blocked. I'm not actually going to explain how to do it using the program, but it's very easy. It'll make it much easier to actually solve this puzzle using the programs with the lines of sight. But you can feel free to use the lines of sight just using a thread. Alright, so I'm hoping to get some responses, and we'll see what happens. See you guys later. Just as you set up the board yourselves and play it, the lines of sight are tricky, but they're not impossible. And so, for the most part, you should be able to even do it just by looking, if you're quite crafty. But part of the challenge is to refine your lines of sight assessment skills, as it were. And it's just something important that I thought about mentioning. Alright, see you guys later.